Great to be here. I'm very excited about this. And that website, do go there. There's a lot of creativity in the website, much more than what even you're going to see here, including an option to get the book free downloaded into your email. And it's a beautiful book, as you'll see. But I wanted to give you a frame, first of all, for this talk, because if you Google me, you'll find out lots about me, and you'll be kind of surprised. Who is this guy? I have written and published a book of poetry and photography already, but like many poets and perhaps photographers, I was stumped early in my career and in my life how to live the life that I really wanted to live. There was a saying back in my day: do what you love, and the money will follow. Right? Well, I never found anybody who'd pay me a dime for one of my meditations or for one of my poems. So I was stuck, man. I mean, I just, what am I going to do? And but I was good in mathematics, and I minored in economics at Harvard when I went there, and so I thought, well, maybe I'll do something like tax returns for a living, and that's what I did. So and out of that, what happened was that I discovered that many people that I did work for also had a life that they really longed to live, that they weren't living. And that got me to think about, is there a way that I could help all of these people pursue their passion, who it is they really want to be, rather than just, work for the dollar, work for Uncle Sam, work for the boss, whoever it is. So I invented a field, and you'll see that I've trained advisors from 30 countries, something like 4,000 advisors all over the world, and it's been an exciting life, but it wasn't ever what I really wanted to do. And in devising this new way of helping advisors work with their clients, which was aimed primarily at the client's most meaningful aspirations, I put together a series of questions and exercises to help people get clear on what it is they really wanted to do. Of course, I did them myself time and time again. And what was interesting is, and you can find them online and all that, but what was interesting when I did this exercise, it never veered. I mean, maybe some minor edits every now and then, but primarily there were three things that came up for me time and time again. Who do you really want to be? And the first of them was, I wanted to live in the weather. Was my term for it. It's living in nature, basically. I wanted to live in the weather. The second thing and you'll see that in the book, it's all through the book. The second thing that I wanted to do was I wanted to create illuminated manuscripts. Most people don't know what those are. I'm looking at Bill Loveland right now at your library, and he knows what they are because he's a librarian and he knows the history of books. So it's really how books began way back and through the Middle Ages. They did incredible illuminations and illustrations for what were often spiritual books. Not always. Sometimes they were very practical, how-to and all that. So that was something that nobody really knew. I couldn't tell my friends, and you got to make a living. So anyway, there was a third thing. And the third thing was that I wanted to live a profoundly meaningful and even spiritual life. And my models for that were probably St. Francis from the West and a Zen poet named Ryokan from the East, a Japanese poet named Ryokan from the East. So those were the things that inspired me, but I had to make a living. So for many years, I helped other people, but I kept this passion alive. 30 years ago, actually, I think it was 29 years ago, but going on 30, I found this little corner of Massachusetts. It's just an acre and a half, a peninsula jutting out into Spectacle Pond. It's a little more than that if you count the driveway coming in. But I discovered this and I realized this is where I can do that work. So I've done this work of these three things for 30 years here on the pond, some of the time still doing the financial work until I retired from doing that. And this book that I'm going to be sharing with you is the culmination of that work. It's 30 years of work. It is a weekly. You're going to see a picture for every week of the year and poems for every week of the year. I won't have time to read them all, but I'll read you a sampling and you'll get a flavor of it. And it's not that different from where you all are in Manlius. It's maybe we're a little bit warmer, a little bit more temperate, but it's not that different. So I think you'll enjoy it from that standpoint. The other thing for you to know is that what I learned so I've lived a very meditative life, and what I've learned in that meditative approach to life is that pursuing my main interest was, how do I live more fully in the present moment? It's really curious. How come, when I ask a trick question, I sometimes give talks to as many as 1,000 people, and I ask a trick question to everyone. I say, have you ever had experienced a moment of freedom in the past? And I say, it's a trick question, but I want you all to raise your hand, I don't know, making love, walking the beach, doing something wildly creative, playing with your kids. Have you ever experienced a moment of freedom in the past? And I get everybody to raise their hand. And then I let them know, you all got it wrong. We have never experienced freedom in the past. The only time we've ever experienced freedom is in the present moment. So my passion was to understand what that meant and to try to get closer and closer to a mastery of living in the present moment. So that's my introduction. Let me share with you now the book itself. There we go. And just tell me, Bill, is that there? You see it?
Yep, I see it. Absolutely.
Fantastic. All right. Well, cool. So, so there it is, Reflections on Spectacle Pond. Right now, it's a digital book. I designed it to be a book that will close in the middle. So this will be published. I don't know, I've been waiting because I have to be on the print floor to make it published, and I didn't want to do it during COVID times. So it may be a couple more years. We'll see. Hope springs eternal on COVID. But you can see that it's designed in two halves, and you'll see that throughout the book. So this is the title page. And then there's a dedication, there's an acknowledgement. In the acknowledgement and in the introduction, I share many, many influences, many more than I've shared already. But this is huge influences both in the world of art and painting and in the world of literature and poetry, as well as in philosophy. So this preface, this is the first page of the real book itself, and you'll see this cutting edge, so to speak, between the pond and the ripples of water. And that happens periodically in the winter. Much of the winter, the pond is frozen, as you see here. This is January 1st to January 8th. I'm not going to read a poem from here. I'm going to go a few pages in, but you'll see sometimes I use full page spreads like this to feel the winter, and other times I'll mix it up. And so here again, you'll see all these edges. And one of the cool things about getting this on your iPhone, which you can, is you can expand these images. You can dive into each of these worlds, which is quite amazing. And I'll skip this again. You see the edges and beautiful, beautiful images, but stark and cold. We all know this wintry experience. Here, I'll read a poem or two from this page. This is January 23rd to 29th. And one of the things I love about this particular page is how it's actually one picture on which I've placed those top three images separately. But you'll see what looks like background up at the top, gray, actually is the pond frozen over with a little bit, you see that where the blue is, there's a little bit of ice that's been broken through So the pond is not too deeply frozen here, broken through by a beaver. So that's what the beaver left. And so I'm going to read two poems. The poems from the right, if you've got a big screen, you can see it. If you've got a small screen, you won't be able to. But this is from the tall frame over on the right. Whiteout yesterday. 3 feet of snow piled all around. When I was young and I couldn't see, I would clean my glasses. Now my eyes are so old, I just let my glasses grow dirty, accepting what is. Cleaning them will hardly help anyway. All I want is to live in the present moment, just to see into my own nature. What use are glasses there? And then the second poem is the one in white, the little poem, five short lines. And this is more of almost a Zen-like poem. I have wandered this path every day for 20 years. Yet wherever I look, I find no trace. That's classic. You're going to see a path. I refer to it throughout the book. It's one of the main themes of the book. There are many themes. There's the sun and the wind and various seasons of nature. But the path in Buddhism, the path stands for a spiritual path. But here you're also going to see it's an actual path. And one of the themes of this book is of spirit and kind of nature intermingling, coming together. And one of the wonderful things about the poem is that it introduces this notion of selflessness. Where am I? I find no trace wherever I look. Here's the first image of the cabin. And the cabin is another theme. In the Chinese landscape tradition, cabins, you'll see tiny little cabins in huge spaces of mountains and lakes. And those cabins actually stand for awakening or enlightenment. So this is a wonderful image in a fisheye lens. And here I'm going to read the poem that you can hardly see because I put it in a tiny font. It's right in the middle. It's a poem that Thoreau would have loved. And it's a poem, one of the reasons I put it in this tiny font is that if you've read any of my other books, you might have read this poem. This poem I included in a book, the prior book to this, called A Golden Civilization and the Map of Mindfulness. And it's a book, well, it looks at all the troubles we've got in the world and it says, darn, why don't we just fix them? And it argues that if we really applied ourselves in one generation, we could fix virtually all the problems in the world. It has a section on media. And right now we're very aware that media breaks into a couple of camps and maybe a few others. And we go, why can't we just have media that tells us the truth? So this is a reflection that Thoreau might have had about the media. And in the book, A Golden Civilization, I call this poem Media. A blade of golden light streams across the ice with perfect aim. Wherever I go, it follows, piercing my heart. A message of morning, direct from the sun, breaking the earth in two. From one great beast to another, it penetrates my heart. And this is my response. I trust the sun to tell the truth. I love its morning news. Where do you find yours, great friend? Where do you find yours? So one of the themes in this book, coming from my passion to live in the weather, is the truth of the world that we live in, this incredible biosphere that each of us has our own unique relationship to. Just how incredible that is compared to the human culture sometimes. So this was January 30th to February 5th. And I'll read a few from this section too. This is, I love this one. Again, 2-page spread. I love this because there's a cross to it, which is a wonderful symbol. The horizontal is strong, stark, almost theatrical, almost film-like, with a strong shadow in the middle. And then these two beautiful images on the top right. So there's this incredible diagonal coming down it of image, and then a diagonal the opposite way with writing. In the top one's just a beautiful landscape. The bottom, I love the simplicity. It's almost like that Chinese figure in Yeats's famous poem, I think it's Lapis Lazuli, where the figure is sitting there with glittering eyes, this ancient Chinese figure. And you just feel the stillness of someone just sitting and experiencing, which is a lot of what the poetry is about. I'm going to read, well, let me just summarize. The first poem up on the top left is one where I slip in the ice. I'm distracted. It happened a long time ago. I slip on the ice. I'm filled with thoughts of things. And then at the end of the poem, so this is a poem series where I link all 4 poems by time. So at the end of the poem, I say 15 years later, slipping in the same icy wind, all the self-absorption is gone. It's one of the wonderful things of doing this practice over 30 years. You see changes that occur inside you. Second poem down lower left. 5 more years have passed. Stomach and lungs feel bad. But when I wake, the mind is marvelously clear. For days, over 5 feet of snow have fallen. My room more still than the snow, free of thought, uncluttered, each line clean. All day I clear my mind, like pushing all the papers on a messy desk off. Over a cliff they fall, miraculously gone. When snow falls off a roof, you never have to put it back. And then the poem on the top right, 6 years later, I am like a deaf man, listening to snowfall, wishing all the other sounds would go away. So this next image, this is Valentine's Day week, and I've got a couple of poems, love poems here, which were wonderful to do, and another full image here, and another full image here. And look at the little wren on the bottom right. We've given room to the wren to live there, and right in the middle of the poem. Here, I'll read the poem on the bottom left. This poem series has lots of huge issues, themes, issues of great time. Bottom left. I was born in a body not meant for longevity. 100 years or less, my likely time, yet everywhere I look, every sound I hear, whatever I feel in my heart and in my body, each moment calls me, as if from thousands of years into the future, or more likely, 13 billion years in the past, of beauty, brilliance, wisdom, and yes, longevity. I fall into awe that I am here for this 13 billionth year, here, exploding in rapture just for this. What was it like for those who were here first? To experience the first moments 13 billion years ago? Just this and this. Simply this. And here, I think I'll read the one on the top right. This is February 27th to March 5th. Again, this has a spiritual nature to it and speaks to some of my influences. I lack the robes, too poor in spirit, but each day I don the habit of a hermit monk and view the changing light, movements of wind, the freezing or flowing of the pond, the gentle arrivals or melting of the snow, as if they were messages from God. I'm not a believer in the way of the world, seldom go to a church, unless this whole world be a church, or this body a temple. But here, in this moment, with no one else around, listening intently, I wonder, who could this voice be for? And then I think I'm going to skip this to give us time at the end. But you can see, the light is shifting a bit. This is early morning light, actually, but you can, and it's really the last image with full-on snow in this series. And here where we are, snow begins to die out sometime in March. On the right, you'll see a wild poem feeling like E. E. Cummings in some way. And I'm going to move on. Now you can see the snow has melted, but it still feels unfriendly, cold, early spring. Here, you see the path. There it is. And far down at the end of the path, you can just catch a glimmer of the cabin. So I have this peninsula that goes out with the lake or the pond on either side, going out to the cabin. And it's really quite magical. I'm going to read the two poems on the right. I pore through large white pages of my poetry, moving through January, February, and March, as if they were thin layers of snow melting before my eyes. For 500 seconds, half a millennium for a particle of light, it streamed with millions of companions across 93 million miles of space to alight softly on this bare stem and reflect into my eyes. How can I ever repay such a gift? The golden light that leaps so gently from snowfall into my sight. So now we're going to move through spring here. And this is an Easter time image with actually my birthday, a birthday poem. I reference Easter and St. Matthew's Passion. Also have a poem carved on a tree, which has history both in the East and the West. You remember in Shakespeare's As You Like It, Orlando carved poems to Rosalind on a tree. And in the Eastern tradition, one of Gary Snyder's most famous books on Cold Mountain were poems written on stones and trees on Cold Mountain in China. The Cold Mountain Poets, they were called. So here we go. We're beginning to see more spring. You can see little bits of green here and shifting light. Here you begin to see the swans come out. You see the little swan in the bottom right and tiny little dots of white in the horizontal, and that's the cabin on the far right there. And little bits of frozen ice. Here we had a late spring snow. As you all are about to get in Manlius. And here, this snow occurred on a beaver. We've got a beaver hutch out there. Beavers are wonderful to experience and horrible to experience at the same time. So we have a love-hate relationship with our beavers, who sometimes cut down our trees, chop down our trees. But a beautiful image of intermingling of spring with the ends of winter. And here, some incredible reflections. Blue sky, again, spring continuing to move forward. Here you really feel spring because the bushes now have, this is the first week of May, and they have buds on them, more than what we're seeing right now. And then here, many more buds. It's clearly still not summer, but you still have some of that fog that occurs and the great temperature differences that occur in the early morning. And another wild image of reflection, almost like an El Greco painting in the bottom right. And here again, much more spring, more of the beautiful, cool colors of spring beginning to come out. And here, a more reflective set of images. And here you get a boat in the pond there, far out there. And then in this next image, I will read, this is one of my favorite photographs because it's so clear, both the grass, the individual strands of grass, but also the clouds are so three-dimensional. You can almost feel, they almost feel like the rock that's over on the right. The rock is also a major theme in the book. You've already seen one image of it from many years before, this particular image in an earlier photograph. I'm going to read the poem. It's about the path. You saw the path in winter, end of winter, early spring, and how barren it was. Well, by now, it's filled with leaves that in a storm are crowding out the path and my ability to walk through it. So that's what I'm going to read about in this bottom right poem. My corridor of curtains closes in. Draperies of bushes, leaves, and stems droop all the way down to the path, blocking my way. I gently push wet bark back as I walk, forthright or lilting down the lane. Each time I'm different. Sometimes like a scout on a scent, I scurry along, my gaze intent downward on each stone, surveying its lines, bordered by moss or by aromas, by tapestries of flowers and leaves. I can feel the arrow of fieldstone carrying me somewhere into a language I'm learning, useless to all others, mysterious to myself. I let each moment be, as if I had already arrived, as if I was always arriving, as if each moment I was setting out on a grand adventure, or after long absence, as if I was just returning home. So we'll go through a few more weeks here. Another very similar image. This poem has lots of poets in it, referred to, and musicians in it. This is more a poem of meditative practice. And this is going into the end of June and early July, and you see the path again. And there it is, the corridor of curtains closed in, right? And here now, July 3rd to 9th, I'm going to read, I love this spread, and I'm going to read the poem on the top right. But first of all, let's talk about the spread. So on the top left, you'll see the swans. I've given over what we call Serenity Point. It was called that by the native Americans who lived here before, long before us, Serenity Point. And my cabin is just, like 10 yards before the very end of Serenity Point. So I frequently give over that point to adolescent swans, to young swans, to baby swans, that the mama and papa bring once they've popped out of the nest and begun to swim. And so they spend much of their adolescence on this point, which is wonderful. This is an adolescent swan with its wings trying, batting its wings, going, "Where are you going? Wait for me." And the parents have said, "No, you stay back there. You're not feeling well. You stay there till you feel better." And so the adolescent swan's quite upset about it. But a wonderful image of the family there swimming off as the swan is protesting. You see the lilies and you'll see the wild roses. I speak a lot about both of them throughout the book, major theme. Top right is a poem I'm going to read. I also, so here's the story of this poem. It's an interesting story. First COVID summer, okay? I have 2 teenage daughters. I'm going, what am I going to do? Already they're like this a bit with us parents. And I'm going, what am I going to do a whole summer with them? And I thought, well, let's create something that we could work on together. So with one of my daughters who's got a really good eye and has had a knack for photography, I had her take all of these images, and believe it or not, this book came out of something like 45,000 photographs that I took of this peninsula in Spectacle Pond. She curated every single one of those photographs, went through them, did the first rating of them, the first developing of the best of them, did the first cropping of them. And I came in and finished the work, but she basically acted as a curator for 45,000 photographs. My other daughter has great musical talent and a beautiful, beautiful voice. I hope you will listen to her on Spotify because what we did, I thought, well, what am I going to do with her? And I thought, let's do an album together. So I'm this guy who abandoned his musical career at age 14, would have loved to have been a rock and roller and all that, but didn't have the opportunity. My parents clearly didn't want me to go that direction. And so I even stopped singing, basically, in my teenage years. But I've always been able to hold a tune. Maybe you'll question that when you hear the album, but I think you'll see I'm all right. Anyway, she and I created an album of protest songs, protesting for the environment, for stronger democracy, protesting about COVID, freedom of various sorts, democratic freedoms. Anyway, one of the songs in there is not a protest song. It's more like a song of the present moment, almost from the Zen tradition. And that's this song here, where I reference Van Gogh and actually St. Francis, not a Zen practitioner, but a Christian monk. And so this is the one song from that tradition. Please go to it and listen. It's for free, and you can listen to my daughter London Kinder's, her wonderful voice, and how we managed to sing together, which was just an incredible delight. Here we go. I'm not going to sing it. I'm just going to read it. My shirt keeps falling like shadows or wind as I walk along the path, against my shoulder, against my skin. It's how I know the movie I'm in has no direction. It's not driving to conclusions. It's not about arriving at freedom at the end. Its heroism is simpler than what we know. Fragile as Francis, vulnerable as Van Gogh. Its freedom is humble, is already here. No self, not deceptive, but shaky and clear. So that's that poem. And moving on to, you can find links to these things also in my on my website. So moving on through the summer a bit. Here you'll see the wonderful flowers we get this time of year in the summer. This is mid-July, and that's the driveway coming in. It's quite astonishing dirt road with flowers all along it. There's some Queen Anne's lace in the bottom right. Here we have, you can tell it's, kind of end of July, maybe getting toward early August, and you can feel the moisture and the, the steaminess of the season here. That I'm not going to read from this one. This is early August, and here there's the heat, and this was an early sunrise and the hot feeling, the mix of hot and cool, the intensity of the colors. And here again, intense colors, but you can feel August is growing here. And in this next image, maybe I'll read just the little three-liner. I think it's a haiku. I often will write my three-liners as haikus, but not always. Here, the coolness of August you're beginning to feel. This is the last half of August. Again, wonderful reflections, a silly circular frame of an umbrella, and my feet staring at the umbrella, taking the picture. Here's the three-liner. It is so funny to return to the moment. How could I forget? And again, it's one of those things, as I mentioned, my passion for this 30 years, a lot of my meditative practice was, how can I be really present? And you try it, and the present moment just keeps going. And so you keep having to return to it if you're trying to experience it. It's quite a rigorous thing. You'd think it'd be the simplest thing in the world. But you get better and better at it, which is a wonderful theme as well. And so let's move through the rest of August here and early September here. And this one you begin, there's the cormorant at the bottom left. The cormorant comes, solitary cormorant comes in late August, early September for a couple of weeks. And then we never see it again until the next year. There you see you can see goldenrod on the top right and the Queen Anne's lace, the end of the Queen Anne's lace on the bottom left. And here you have a fisheye lens of my meditation space, and this is in the cabin actually. I put lots of windows. It's a small cabin, but I put lots of windows in because this inside-outside nature was very intriguing to me, and I wanted to always have a feel of nature. But you see a beautiful image of the pond, obviously. This is an homage to the great Japanese printmakers of the 19th century, Hokusai and Hiroshige, and also by way of them, Vincent van Gogh, who was one of my heroes as well. You might not know this about Van Gogh, but Van Gogh was a profoundly spiritual person. Religious person. He wanted to be a priest, and he was just a little too shaky. My recollection is to be able to make it, but he was his insights. Spiritual insights were amazing. There was a reason why he and Gauguin were so powerfully intense friends together. And the reason that Gauguin went off to paint paradise in Tahiti, Van Gogh stayed to paint paradise in the south of France. Both of them were fascinated with what the meaning of paradise is. And Van Gogh called paradise for a period of years, he called it Japan, because he was influenced by these Japanese printmakers of the 19th century. So this is one of my homages. They were among my greatest influence, each of those figures. And I'm not going to read from this, but I'm going to go further to this series where I will read. And this is one of those series where, I had this incredible poem of all this color, and I wanted to, this photograph, all this color, I wanted to show you the photograph, but gosh, the poetry from this week over 30 years was just so good that I had to put poem after poem after poem on it. And so I'm going to read 3 of them. And then these will be, I think, the last of the long poems. Maybe there'll be one more reasonably long poem as well before we end. September 25th to October 1st. Believe it or not, this whole series had one more poem right in the middle of the pond there, and I stripped it apart so you could see the reflections of the clouds in the pond. The top left poem is called Just an Old Man Losing Sight and Sound and Sense. Oh, if you only had my eyes, everything you saw would be a work of art. And if only you had my ears, everything you would hear would be onrushing music, pulling you forward into every opening, into endless conclusions. And oh, if you only had my sense, you would feel in every brush of wind, in every shift of atmosphere, the touch of intimacy, as if the great being of the world constantly made love to you. And oh, if you only had my spirit, if I could only touch you with my passion, all the world in every moment would reveal itself as your creation. Second poem. Started off the day with business. Always a bad idea, regardless of how successful it might be. Sets the tone, puts a frame on a day that misses its central purpose, its essence. I go into a day as if it were a world I've never worn before, a set of clothes whose very feel and fashion is something I've never known. I enter a day as if I am wise already and naive at the same time, innocent of all the well-worn notions by which we cast cloaks of gray upon our days. I listen to every sensation as if to a new music, a music of beings I've never met, imploring me to be there in just their particular way, as if they together were one giant being engulfing me with sound. I enter a day on the tongue of the great beast, in the ear of the muse, on the arrow of the archer of time itself, and speed along his course as he sows the day into being. How could I start the day with business? And then the top right is one of my later poems, and I think it expresses how much having a spiritual life really does develop over time and develop you over time. So highly recommend it. Here is this final poem of this section. As I have aged, my meditation has become more glorious, happening all the time, wherever I am. Instead of watching TV or surfing the web or reading a book, I shine like the sun. How can it be? Everything I touch becomes still and illuminated. This is my native place. This is where I was born. To all who would conquer fear, I say, keep returning to your native place. So now we're going to go through fall a bit. Here's October with its glorious moons, full moons. And here, again, wonderful image of late fall, orange, but a lot of yellows coming in here. October 9th to 15th, that's mid-fall here. This is getting a little bit later in the fall, and you'll see some wonderful fisheye lenses, an incredible picture of clouds with leaves in the pond. And here, late fall with the yellow, just the yellow hanging. And here, getting later. Now, this was an amazing set. Again, the full moon on the left, but on the right, there was this incredible year. I think it was just like 5 years ago. You might have had it up in your way too, where we had an incredible snowfall right at the end of October. I think it was Halloween time. And it happened, we'd had a late fall. And so you had these glorious, you could see the colors of the leaves, this fall, and then the snow covering it. So it's one of the days I took more pictures than any other day of the year. And along the right-hand side, you'll also see railroad tracks running, and railroad is a theme in the book. I don't know that I've touched it on any of these poems, but it's one of the major themes. So this is the driveway again coming in. I'm not going to read from these. I will read from a November set in a moment, but this is the last real feel of fall. Here you get the cabin again, and yeah, you get a little the yellows, right? But it feels like winter's coming. And November is a month most of us don't like very much. And this image is beautiful, but you feel that a bit. You're not sure you like this November that's coming. And here, this is one of the reasons I can love November, is it at the same time, it feels wild in its darkness and wild in its cold and all of that. And you have this fog on the top left. Maybe that's a little bit of snow in there, I think. And full moon again in the wild wide angle lenses. I'm going to read another 3-line poem here, and then we'll just have another couple of poems left and a little bit of postscript. 3-liner in the middle. Not a haiku. What a useless man I must seem, spending my time opening moments as if they were bottles of wine. Winter, right? End of December and end of November, early December, we get snows. Snows. And here, this was a time where the snow had fallen back, away. And but I love this again, like that wild November series of images. These are wild images, dark, foreboding, but beautiful images and beautiful poetry too. I'm not going to read from. This one I love because it's Christmas Eve. This is December 18th to December 24th. And I feel in that top image, I feel like I'm almost like I'm peering into, the manger somehow, that I have this privileged view on this intimate place of great light. And it's so special that I don't even see the other photograph here that's down at the bottom, but the words carry me down. So this is one of the ways that I work with integrating words and image. The words carry me down, and then I see the other image, and it's equally beautiful. And back to that series of boundaries and edges that I talked about at the beginning of this presentation. I'm not going to read from these poems either, but wonderful image. Winter's filled with beautiful imagery. And here I am going to read here. This is the Christmas and New Year's series. I'm going to read the top left, which just references Christmas. And then the bottom right, the little 4-liner. And then I share a bit from a postscript. I live a hermit's life, even on Christmas. I live in the clouds, reflected in the pond. And when the pond turns toward ice, I live in its mottled flow. I live for the moment the sun bursts past the back of my chair onto the page I'm writing. As my fingers connect, clumsy, intelligent, lacing my shoes to go get tea, I see answers in the present moment, noticing the breaths exhale as the gray laced shoe plops my falling foot onto the floor. I like the present. Reminds me who I am. And then the final poem, bottom 4-liner, it actually goes with the poem above it, but I'm going to read it just as a final 4-liner before the postscript. I can say it's simpler than this, although there's not much to say. Just this hulking, wintry body walking through fields of light. So I thought as I finished the book, I thought, you could read this book as someone who's this hermit monk as I play roles throughout the book. But it's not entirely me, as you know from my talking about the very beginning of the book and where I was and what I've done in the world. And in fact, the last book that I wrote, the book about a golden civilization, which was about how can we cure the problems of the earth, I went on a world tour for that book. I traveled to India. I traveled to Hong Kong. I traveled to China. I traveled to Japan. I traveled all over Europe and America. And my passion was to find out what people thought when I shared how we might, and I gave a little exercise, how we might deliver a completely healed world, a golden civilization within a single generation. And what I found was that everywhere people wanted the same thing. They wanted kindness. Believe it or not, I mean, there I was in Hong Kong watching the democracy protests before the Chinese shut down Hong Kong. People, everywhere I went, people wanted kindness. They wanted democracy. They wanted no war. That stings us a bit right now and this time. No war. They wanted all kinds of democratic freedoms. They wanted a press that spoke truth. At all times. They wanted an end to racism and all forms of bigotry. They wanted an end to corruption everywhere. They wanted lesser inequalities everywhere. Everywhere I went, didn't matter. Red state, blue state, autocratic country, democratic country, same thing. So I'm going to talk. So what I did in that prior book, and I just decided I'm going to include a postscript to all my poetry books that just references that. I included a couple of tools that I felt would really help if we wanted to actually make in a single generation a world that would end all those things that don't work and make a world that really would work. So I did again, you see the image of the ice and all, and I talk a little bit about it here. So it's just 3 pages and 2 pages of imagery. So here, the image, this is the image of the map of mindfulness. And just, my passion has been the present moment, to cultivate an awareness of the present moment. What I discovered from 30 years of just going at the present moment was that what you're doing is you're letting go of all your stories about yourself. So you're actually cultivating selflessness, which is what this image says. And what I realized when I was reflecting on this trick question about time and space, when have you ever experienced a moment of freedom? Only in the present moment, was that our map of time and space, as you see it, as the physicists show it, isn't right. The present moment is much huger than we see in that. So I created a map that centers on the present moment, cultivates selflessness, and then delivers great virtue, great quiet, and great spirit into civilization. So I'll leave you that as a tantalizing thing. You might read that other book as well. And then the final image here is going to be my more practical. This is a little bit easier to understand. So what I thought was, I wrestled with this a lot. As I said, I minored in economics. I thought a lot, and I've been in the financial world while I've been dedicated to a creative life. And I thought there's got to be a way that's really simple, that just is one law that would shift everything. And in the financial world, there's something called a fiduciary standard, and it isn't as good as it should be. So I thought, what if it really was something extraordinary? What would it look like? And could we cure all the problems of the world by adopting a simple fiduciary standard? So here it is. It's my 1-sentence legislative proposal. A fiduciary standard of obligation is required for all institutions, corporate, nonprofit, and governmental, to place the interests of all stakeholders of humanity, democracy, and the living planet that sustains us first above their own self-interest. Wouldn't that be incredible? So anyway, that's the scoop. And the living planet I didn't mention, but all the golden civilization conversations everywhere, people said, we want a sustainable planet, we want a healthy planet, all of these things. So it was really quite incredible, quite an incredible experience, as it has been talking to all of you. And I wanted to thank you and thank Bill, but I wanted to give Bill a chance to ask a few questions for you. And let me open up to stop share and just Bill and me come back on here. What do you say, Bill?
Well, first, thank you so much, George. That was really very kind of you to spend an hour with our community, and think that you've given us all a lot to consider and reflect upon. But in terms of questions for you, you seem to have appreciation for all times of the year on Spectacle Pond. But are there any times during the year that hold a special place in your heart?
Oh gosh, Bill. Well, I'm a New Englander, and so for the longest time, I've lived for just 2 weeks out of the year, which are the 2 weeks where the fall foliage just explodes here and the air is crisp and you can take these wonderful walks without feeling too hot or too cold. So that's been really, really special. But as the years have gone on, I've learned to appreciate every season for that. When you walk out in the air, the freshness is so amazing. Just, it calls for you to be alive and awake. And I've learned to love every piece of it. Yeah.
Thank you. What have you learned from your time on Spectacle Pond? Is there anything that you've learned from nature? Are there any animals that you have considered to be teachers for you?
Yeah, I have a lot I talk about the birds a lot because I'm not an ornithologist. I don't know their sort of songs particularly well. I don't know their names, but I listen to them as if they're friends or they're my children or they're teachers. And the swans, as you know from whether it's Swan Lake or one of the Norse myths, swans are birds of transformation in the East. They're symbols of awakening or of enlightenment. And and purity, obviously. So they speak to me, they send bullets to my heart. I talk about that on occasion. But I think the most incredible thing that I learned here, Bill, it really stunned me. I wanted to live a deeply spiritual life in here. I wanted to live in the weather out there. I didn't fully realize that they were the same thing. And what I came to realize, you have this, if you're, not everybody's spiritual, not everybody's religious, but if you are, and you can have an amazing time walking in the woods or walking along the beach or seeing the moon at night, and you go, wow, and it's like you feel God all around you, or if you feel the spiritual nature of things. And what I came to realize living through the cycle of the seasons and focusing minutely on present moments of sensation. That's how you focus on the present moment, not your thoughts. You let your thoughts go, just moments of sensation. So what I'm doing by focusing on those moments of sensation is I'm bringing that external nature in and I'm feeling it here. And what I came to realize was that those extraordinary experiences that we have could also be described in scientific terms as the experience of our individual biospheres. And so what was remarkable for me was not merely the analysis of the seasons and all that, but living, celebrating, enjoying, rejoicing with, loving, being enraptured with nature is something that has a scientific connection and a scientific value as much as a profound spiritual and artistic and cultural value. So that was all, that was, I think, the most incredible learning that I had. Yeah.
Thank you. In the poems you shared today, you often talked about paths. What significance do paths hold for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I'm writing believe it or not, I'm suffering a little bit. I'm suffering from possibly long COVID. I had pneumonia 2 years ago, and I've had a fatigue that's lasted. So it's a terrible thing. But at the same time, because of all this work, I have lots of energy, and then I collapse. So in that energy, I'm actually completing 5 books. 4 of them are doing what you just saw for a daily book on spring. You just seen the weekly edition. I'm going to have a daily book on spring, a daily book. So the daily book on spring is going to be practically twice as long as what you've just received. And same thing with summer. I'm just about finished with spring. I'm starting summer. I'll have the whole cycle done because it's all over 30 years within a year. So I'll have those 4 books done. And then the other one is called The 3 Domains of Freedom. Now, this is really going at answering your question. And do you want to remind me of your question one more time, just so I nail it?
Yeah.
Precisely?
So basically, in your poems you shared today, you talked often about paths and what significance do paths hold for you.
Right. So this final book that I'm writing is called The 3 Domains of Freedom. And it's really all revealed in the subtitles. The 3 Domains of Freedom. Each moment is yours. Your life is yours. Civilization is yours. So path has a very special meaning for me. It really is about delivering freedom inside ourselves and for others. And each moment is ours is an extraordinary notion that we don't enough live. And that's part of what I'm trying with my books, to give you more skills and tools or more inspiration to live like each moment is mine. The second one, your life is yours, was what I have taught these financial advisors, these coaches, to do with their clients, to devise a path that leads the client in short order toward the life that they feel would be the most profound and most inspiring life they could live. And it's a path. So that has great meaning. And then the third one, the golden civilization, I mean, it's so strange. Here we are. I mean, it's wonderful on Zoom. Here you and I are, a couple hundred miles away, something like that. And yet, we're talking like we're just right next to each other, known each other all our lives, neighbors and all that. And it's so wonderful. And I talk on Zoom to people from all over the world. And now together, wouldn't it be wonderful to come together and have a path and realize that we have a path for, is it for Homo sapiens? Is it for civilization? Isn't it time? Haven't we come through so much in our history as Homo sapiens that it's time for us to go, okay, what was this all about? Where are we going? And can we join together and let's just make it happen? And there's a lot of differences between us. Yeah, okay, let's honor those differences, but let's make what's incredible about us and possible for us happen. That's a path. So to me, a path is pretty wonderful in all of those ways. Yeah.
Wow, that's a big answer, but hopefully something that we can all work towards. I guess in my last question, and you did promote some works throughout your talk between the music that you worked with your daughter London on, and some of the other works that you've worked on in the past. But is there anything else that you would like to mention or promote to our audience?
Well, it's so wonderful being here with you and really, experiencing Manlius through you and through this opportunity to share with you. And of course, I've looked it up on Wikipedia and learned about different things about your community. With my wife, Kathy, we teach a meditation class twice a day on Wednesdays. So Wednesdays at noon and at 7, I think. And then for an hour and then a half hour after that, 15 minutes to a half hour after that, is a deep dive into one of these images. So if anyone wanted to join it, not just for a one-time thing, but wanted to join it for 6 weeks or for longer, just to try it out, to try out meditation, we'd be delighted, Kathy and I, to welcome you. And so I think that would be all that I can think of, Bill. I'm sure there's many more. I've written 6 books. They're all wonderful. Maybe, Bill, you could look at them for the library somehow.
Yep, absolutely. So I assume kinderinstitute.com is where we go to find out more information on those classes and everything else that you have going on.
Either that or georgekinder.com.
Or georgekinder.com.
Kinder is my personal one, and that has more artsy.
Sure.
Kinder Institute's a little bit more oriented toward the financial, how to find that financial path or so. But you'll find them intermingling.